It started with a dare. The senior minister of the church where I was serving at the time issued a challenge to the congregation. Let's give up alcohol for Lent. Everyone, let's do it. Now, there's nothing inherently bad about alcohol, he said from the pulpit. In fact, it's a good part of creation. But often we can use alcohol to cover up pain in our lives or self-medicate with it to cope with situations that actually require other forms of help. And sometimes, he said, we can even ignore the ways that it has a powerful and even dangerous hold over our lives. The senior minister went on to dare folks to donate the money that they would have spent on alcohol during Lent to the church. And that's how we ended up raising over $50,000. It was a Methodist church. To donate to a local substance abuse program in our community. After the service in which the senior minister had shared this challenge, one of the members, a man named Dave, pulled me aside to a quiet part of the lobby. Dave was a kind and gentle person, always willing to lend a helping hand, and he looked me in the eye with conviction and said, I imagine that as people go through this challenge, some of them might come to you realizing that they have found that alcohol plays a bigger part of their life than they realized. And I want you to know that I myself am a recovering alcoholic. And thanks to the support of my AA group, I've been sober for a long time now. And if anyone needs someone to talk to about what it's like to seek help, I would be more than willing to speak with them. Dave smiled, he shook my hand, and he left. And I had just been given an amazing lesson in the power of vulnerability, the healing power of being open with oneself. Have you ever been going about your day just minding your own business, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an embarrassing memory from your past pops into your mind? For me, it's a memory of a science fair project that I gave in 6th grade. I was supposed to present a working replica of Stonehenge made out of those shipping peanuts. And there were 100 other 6th graders gathered to watch my presentation. And when the time came for me to go on, I became a nervous mess of sweaty palms and stuttered speech. None of my jokes landed, and I had some pretty good jokes about Stonehenge, let me tell you. Now, the weird thing is, I can be standing in line at Trader Joe's ready to check out, and I will have a flashback to 6th grade Kevin standing there in front of his class as kids snicker and laugh. It's almost enough to make me drop my basket full of cookies. Almost. Perhaps you have a memory or a set of memories that make uninvited cameos from time to time in your consciousness. It turns out that these things are called involuntary memories, and they're a real thing. Dr. Jennifer Wild, a clinical psychologist at the Oxford Center for Anxiety Disorders and Trauma, says that these involuntary memories can be triggered by an external stimulus. For instance, it could be that the particular shade of yellow in the mustard aisle reminds you of the color of shirt you were wearing on the day when you spilled coffee all over your shirt during a first date that didn't go so well. Or it could be internal, some way that you're feeling that day, or simply your train of thought. But whatever it is that triggers these involuntary memories, when they happen, your body reacts by pumping itself full of adrenaline. And shame begins to creep over your consciousness, causing you to try to push that memory down deeper, hide it away where it won't cause you pain anymore. You follow the advice of the song from the musical Dear Evan Hansen that goes, step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. And no one wants to get burned, right? Our gospel passage today is about a person named Nicodemus, riddled with so much shame that he goes to see Jesus in the middle of the night so as not to be seen by his friends and community. And he asks Jesus the questions that have been burning in his mind, but that he has been too embarrassed to ask anyone else. In our story today, Jesus references back to him a passage from the book of Numbers that you heard read. In this story that Jesus recounts and references, the Israelites began to curse God for leading them into the wilderness so that a brood of poisonous snakes enters their camp. And God tells Moses that after the snakes have bit the people, causing some of them to die and grow ill, that if Moses will make a bronze snake and put it on a pole, then if people look at it, they will live. Now, I'm sure by this point in his interaction with Jesus, that this Pharisee Nicodemus begins to squirm a little. He's not a dumb guy. He knows maybe where Jesus is headed with this. But Jesus isn't finished. He leaves nothing on the table for his newfound friend. He says, light has come into the world, but people loved the darkness rather than the light because their deeds were evil. For all who do evil, hate the light and do not come into the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed. But those who do what is true, they come to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that their deeds have been done in God. I imagine at this point that Jesus' reference to clinging to things that are in the light are not lost on Nicodemus as he looks at the darkness around him and is reminded of his choice for a nocturnal meeting with Jesus. Brené Brown says that shame derives its power from being unspeakable. And I would add that shame also derives power in our lives from being hidden. We take the parts of our lives that we're most pained of and that cause us the most shame, and we try to tuck them away. We bury them. We refuse to even acknowledge that they're even there. We put them in a box in the confines of our consciousness and shove them away where they will never be seen and hopefully never cause us discomfort. But the less that we speak about our shame, and the less that we speak about the things that are really going on in our lives, the greater pain plays a role in who we are. Charisse was a volunteer at a social service ministry I worked at, and she came each day arriving early and leaving late. Other volunteers would show up maybe only once or twice a week, take weeks off, but Charisse would be there every single day, and she showed up to the point of exhaustion. You would see her come in with bags under her eyes. We would say, Charisse, just take a day off. We have plenty of volunteers. It's okay. But she would show up the next day, ready to get to work, tiring herself out. And when Charisse got tired from her volunteer work, she became short and even rude to other volunteers. Now, I'm no expert, but a general rule of thumb when it comes to volunteering is that if your volunteering causes other folks to stop volunteering, there might be a problem. I spoke with my manager about my concerns for Charisse and learned that she had one time only volunteered 1 or even 2 days a week at most. However, after a nasty divorce a couple years ago, she had stepped up her volunteer hours 100-fold, trying to keep her life as busy as possible, never even mentioning her divorce to other pastors on staff. It seemed to be an extremely sensitive subject for her. And so, Charisse remained reticent about her divorce, and she kept plowing away at her volunteer hours to the point of exhaustion for both herself and her fellow volunteers. The Franciscan Richard Rohr writes this: if we do not transform our pain, we will always transmit it to our partner, our spouse, our children, our friends, our coworkers, and might I even add, our church. Usually we project it outwards and blame someone else for causing our pain, Father Rohr goes on to write. This is why Nicodemus, even though he is a wealthy and respected man, rearranges his entire schedule and sneaks over to have a midnight conversation with Jesus when he should be asleep in his bed like everyone else. This is why people load their schedules to the point of exhaustion and say, no, I can't stop. I have to do this. They need me, so that they won't have a free moment to think about the pain of the loved one they just lost. This is why some people choose to self-medicate, sometimes in drastic ways, rather than seek out the help of a medical professional or therapist who might help them address what is really causing them pain, spiritual, emotional, or physical. And when we spend so much time wrestling with our pain and trying to keep our shame under wraps, trying to step out of the light, we are unable to hear the voice of Jesus telling Nicodemus and ourselves that God so loved the world, so loved you, so loved me. Father Greg Boyle writes, one of the many impediments to hearing the only message God longs to communicate to us is our marriage to the pain we carry and the lament that accompanies it. Let me say that again. One of the many impediments to hearing the only message God longs to communicate to us is our marriage to the pain we carry and the lament that accompanies it. This is why the story that Jesus references from the book of Numbers is so powerful. The Israelites must first look at and acknowledge the very thing that had caused them pain in the first place. You want to be healed? Great. Let's look up and start by acknowledging the very thing that caused us pain in the first place. Look at that snake. Look at that snake that bit you. What caused that snake to bite you? Can we talk about that? It's really hard to treat an injury if you won't tell the doctor where it hurts. During my third and final year as a student at Duke Divinity School, I arrived on West Campus early one morning after a restless night of sleep. I shuffled into Duke Chapel right after its massive doors opened for the day. I collapsed into a pew not unlike the ones you're sitting in now, and I issued God an ultimatum. God, I said, don't let me be gay, or don't call me into the ministry. Choose one. Now that moment was important for me because it was one of the first times that I had actually looked up and confronted two things about my life that I had grown discomforted about. One, being gay, and two, being deeply scared about what that meant for going into ministry. Now, as is often the case, God did not respond to my ultimatum. And now I find myself a decade later serving here at a church and, well, not super straight. I had to look up and acknowledge the thing that was causing me pain and shame in order to process and experience God's healing and hope. Hiding it away, tucking it away, ignoring it wasn't going to lead to freedom. During this season of Lent, God is asking us, you and me, to change the rules of the game. You see, rather than defaulting to the usual method of taking those parts of us that feel painful, that feel tender, that feel shameful, and hiding them away, and locking them away, and not letting them see the light of day, God is asking us to play a little differently, to leave the shadows and walk into the light of God's love. During these 40 days, God invites you and me to take a deep breath and summon the courage to look at the pain and the shame-ridden parts of our lives that we have tried to hide away for too long. And when we look up and acknowledge that yes, these parts of our lives do hurt, and yes, we are in need of help, then we open the door for God and for our community to begin the important work of healing. Friends, this will hurt. I wish I could tell you differently, but this will hurt. And for that reason, some of us, many of us perhaps, we'll choose not to do it. We'll continue locking away those parts of our lives and then transmitting that pain onto other people, wondering, why is it that I don't get along with the people around me, when what's festering inside of us is the cause? But some of us will choose to take this journey of new creation. Some of us will choose to meet with Jesus, whether it be now or at midnight, and say, how is it that I can experience this new life? How is it that I can find out what it means to be born into a new creation? So if you're struggling with substance abuse or find yourself concealing the extra pills that you're taking just to make it through the day, look up. If you're embarrassed about a failed relationship or terrified about how you might be judged because of a divorce, look up. If you're hiding in the closet and keeping one of the best parts of you hidden away from the rest of the world because you're scared what they might think, look up. If you feel inadequate, if you feel like an imposter, someone who's standing in someone else's shoes, and you keep pushing everyone away because you're scared that they might find out the truth of who you are, look up. If your life or your family hasn't turned out how you imagined, and it's easier you find to not even talk about anyone or bring up the fact that you feel like a disappointment, look up. If you run yourself ragged, trying to put up the appearance of someone who has their life together, when in reality, it's all you can just to get dressed in the morning and get your feet out the door, look up. Look up, dear friend. Look up. Step into the sun and look up. Your new life is at hand. Amen.